Tor Des Geants is one of the most challenging mountain races in the world, covering some of the most difficult terrain, and runners can expect all sorts of weather, so there's quite a bit of kit that's required. I ran the race back in 2018. It was my first 200+ mile race, and after watching Francois Dehaene just crush it in this year's race, it got me thinking about maybe going back one day myself for another lap. I learned a lot in that first race and in the two 200+ mile races I've done since, and gear has evolved a little bit since then as well. So I thought I'd take a look back with you now at the gear that I used and talk about what worked and where I might improve if I was to do it again. Now, one thing that appears to have changed since I ran the race is that there's a shorter list of mandatory equipment along with what they're calling required equipment. Whereas when I did the race, everything was considered mandatory. They did a comprehensive gear check before, along with, I think, random checks during the race, and you had to carry everything with you the entire time. So starting with that mandatory equipment, and this is, in their words, the equipment that has to be carried in the backpack for the entire race. This includes a cup for the aid stations, a mobile phone for emergencies, identity document with your health insurance card, 2 survival blankets, food for in between the aid stations, water supply, at least 1.5 liters, and 2 working headlamps, along with spare batteries. So most of that is pretty self-explanatory, but let's start with one thing that has changed for me, which is the headlamps. So back in 2018, I was still using headlamps from Petzl, mostly the Petzl Now, which at the time was probably the best and brightest headlamp available on the market, along with the Petzl Reactic Plus as my backup headlamp. And I was also using this at the time for all of my shorter runs, my evening runs, and things like that. These headlamps do use proprietary batteries. I did a review of the newer Petzl Now recently on my channel as well. It's still a great headlamp, but the main feature that you're paying for with Petzl is that reactive technology where the headlamp automatically dims or gets brighter as you look up at the trail or look down at a map, it'll automatically dim. But I've started using headlamps from Phoenix, as many of you know, specifically for the most part, the HM65RT. And this here is the newer version, the V2. And the reason I like headlamps from Phoenix so much is because they're just much better value. And they are typically more durable as well. Mostly this version here is magnesium alloy construction, and it's priced at about $100 US. It doesn't use proprietary batteries, although Phoenix does make their own that have these built-in charging ports, which is really cool. The newer ones are USB-C, and the headlamps themselves are all USB-C, very powerful, very durable, just really reliable overall. I have a review of the original HM65RT on my channel. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a comparison maybe to this V2. There's also one called the HM65RDT, which has a warm spotlight. So again, similar overall build quality, similar form factor, just slightly different features with the bulbs. They all use BOA fit for the strap, which I love. The only downside in this model is that all the weight is at the front, unlike the Petzl Now, which had the battery at the back, helps distribute that weight. But again, much better value, more durable, more dependable in my experience, just great headlamps overall. Now, I did get this headlamp for free, and Phoenix has sponsored several of my projects over the years, so keep that in mind. But the reason that I feel so good about working with Phoenix and recommending their products is, again, because I feel that they're such good value. And as a backup headlamp, I'd probably carry one of their lighter weight models along with a spare battery, just to satisfy that need. This one here is actually made of plastic, and it's not as durable, but as a backup would work just fine. Okay, so let's move on to the required equipment. And in their words, this is equipment that runners may carry in their backpacks or leave in their tour bags, according to their own assessment or as instructed by the race organizers. But the final choice is entirely at the discretion of the runner. And the tour bags they're referring to is the big duffel bag that runners are given. That's transported from life base to life base. This acts as your drop bag. It's really cool. You don't have to pack separate drop bags. They actually carry this with you, so you can swap stuff in and out. Now, I had run most of the race in a pair of the Salomon Sense Pros, which were my favorite shoes. I used them for all of my ultras for the first 7 or 8 years of my running career. Unfortunately, those shoes were discontinued though recently. But I did also have a pair of the Salomon Sense Rides as a backup shoe, and I switched into those at the end of the race, I think for the last 20 or 30 miles, just to give my feet a bit of a break. They had a little bit more room in the toe box. So I think what I would probably use though would be these, the new Salomon S-Lab Genesis. Now, I shouldn't say new. These actually came out a couple of seasons ago, but this is the new colorway. Now, these shoes are purpose-built for long distance. They have a a slightly thicker and much more durable midsole. They still have a great lug pattern, suitable for all types of terrain. And a really durable upper. They've got the newer built-in gaiter system that most of the S-Lab models have. These are a really great shoe, and I've used these for some longer fast packing adventures, and I also used these for the second half of UTMB back in 2022 when they first were released. These would be great for a race like Tor Des Geants, where you need to be running on roads, on trails, on technical mountain terrain, potentially in the snow, in mud and rain. This can do it all. Now, as I talk about Salomon products throughout this video, do keep in mind that I am a Salomon ambassador, a sponsored ambassador, so I am contractually obliged to wear Salomon shoes during races like this, but I work with Salomon because the S-Lab shoes just fit my foot really well. I have a narrow foot, I don't get blisters, I don't get any foot problems when wearing Salomon shoes, but you need to find a shoe that fits your foot first and foremost, because features like outsoles and uppers, they don't matter if you're getting foot problems, because that's going to take you out of a race. So next up on the list of required kit are traction devices. These are from a company called Hillsound. They are the Trail Crampon Ultras, and basically they're similar to the Catahulas, the red ones that you often see in REI. This is a Vancouver-based company, and what makes these unique is they have a strap over the top that velcros and helps to really lock them down. I find these to be the best on the market that I've used anyway. Again, based in Vancouver here, which is great. I love supporting local brands where I can. They're a smaller company though, so you may need to order these online if you're interested. But these are really great for winter running, for running on hard-packed snow, and of course for races like Tor Des Geants where you're required to carry traction devices. And they fit into this little bag that comes with them as well to keep them from ripping your pack open. Okay, next up are waterproof pants, and these are the Salomon Benatti waterproof pants. These have evolved over the years. They've gotten a little bit lighter, so I would definitely still use these. I used these originally during Tour, and I would use them again. Very similar to the Benatti waterproof jacket, if you are familiar with those in terms of the construction. And yeah, they act as a good insulating layer as well. So whenever I do a race where you're required to wear leggings, sometimes you need to carry waterproof pants in addition to leggings, but where they don't specify, I typically bring these because they will protect you against the weather, against the rain, but they also can act as an insulating layer just to keep you warm if it's just cool, even if it's dry. And that leads me into the Salomon Benatti jacket. Similar to the pants, it's got the tape seams that are a requirement for races like Tour and UTMB. This jacket's just really good value. It will wet through after a couple of hours, like most waterproof jackets, but it's quite breathable. It's not too warm, so you won't sweat too much from the inside. But again, pretty good value. You could buy 2 of these for the price of some of the more expensive waterproof jackets on the market and have a spare waiting in your drop bag instead. Okay, so you're required to carry a hooded thermal jacket suitable for cold temperatures. They recommend something suitable for down to -15 degrees. I would have used the Arc'teryx Cerium SL. This is the hoodless version. This was actually discontinued. They then released a version with a hood, and even that I believe has been discontinued. This is a really nice piece. As you can see, it packs down to almost nothing. It weighs very little. It was very expensive at the time, but I've been using this for years for all my backcountry adventures. But I'm not sure that this would actually meet the requirement for cold weather that they're suggesting. So I think I would probably use something like the Nova UL here from Outdoor Vitals. This is not nearly as compressible, nor as lightweight, but it's much warmer. It's synthetic, so it also hold up to wetter conditions much better. I'd probably keep this in my drop bag just in case of emergencies, in case we had a really cold year. This would do much better than the Cerium SL would in extremely cold conditions anyway. Now, in addition to waterproof pants, you're required to have leggings that cover the knee, a long sleeve top in technical fabric, and a hat that covers the ears. And so I would have used base layers, merino wool base layers from Icebreaker. I believe these 2 are exactly the ones I had. I've had these, I think, for about 10 years. These are slightly newer, and merino wool is great for all types of conditions. So I think I would use these exact things again. Okay, for gloves, I like to have options during a race, and you are required to have warm and waterproof gloves. gloves. I would probably start with the Row from Arc'teryx. These are thin synthetic gloves. I've mentioned these in other videos before. Quite durable for a thin glove, and I would probably just have these with me the whole time. I often carry these with me when I'm running, especially at night and whenever it's approaching freezing conditions. I then would have a pair of the Venta, at least available, if not in my pack the whole time. These are excellent for cooler conditions, but also for wet conditions. I've given up on waterproof gloves. They wet through too quickly. But these act almost like a diving glove, like a neoprene glove. They do get wet, but they still keep your hands warm. They're the only gloves I've found that do that still keep your hands warm when they're wet. And so I would definitely carry these with me, as I said, or at least have them available. They're on the pricier side, but definitely worth trying out. In the coldest conditions, if we did end up with snow or something, I'd like to have something like this available as well. These are mitts. These are from Salomon. They're really just made for running in the snow. I use these when it gets, well below zero. But again, I would like to have these available in my drop bag just in case. Okay, you're required to carry a whistle, a knife, and they say some cords for little repairs. I carry stuff like this all the time in my first aid kit, which is with me whenever I'm in the backcountry or for any big mountain race. This little knife is great. It's super light, but it's good for in an emergency for making gear repairs or cutting bandages and things like that. A nice big loud whistle, some medications, blister care. I've got an emergency bivy sack, some bandages, and this all, as I said, just all goes in this first aid kit, which is with me all the time. They say you need a power bank to recharge your phone and other equipment. I like power banks from Nightcore. This is the NB10000. You'll get at least a few charges of your phone out of this one, and it's got USB-C as well. You need a GPS navigator with the race route loaded, and at the time I would have been using a Suunto watch, but I've since started working with Coros as a sponsor, and they've sent me this, the Coros Vertix 2S, which I used during the Moab 240. It's got built-in navigation. You can load the maps up, which is really important for a race like this. The race is flagged, but it's tricky in a lot of spots, especially as you go in and out of the valley through the towns. And this one would actually last me the entirety of the race without charging. Now that's it for the required and the mandatory kit, but as far as discretionary gear goes, the Salomon XA filter cap here was released since I did Tor Des Geants last, and I would definitely carry one of these. There are cows way up in the Alpine, even right near and right below the glaciers in the Alps, and so this would allow you to pull water from creeks during the race. So I always carry one of these when I'm racing in the Alps. Okay, so for poles, now I would have been using the Black Diamond Distance Carbon Zeds back then, and you definitely do need to use poles for Tor Des Geants. You'd be crazy not to with that much elevation change, but I've since switched to the Leckies here. These are the FX1 Super Lights with the glove system, which I absolutely love. But the Black Diamonds are really good value. They're still fairly lightweight and they're much more durable. So I often recommend that people start with those. I'll link to those still as well in the description below because, again, I think they're a better place to start. But once you go Leckie, it's hard to go back. And the problem though is that these are very expensive. Especially the FX1 Super Lights, they're not durable at all. I've broken two of these. Basically, I break one each season. And Leckie will tell you that these are for racing. The regular FX1s, they consider more for training. But they are amazing. They're so light, and the glove system is just really great for getting more power, more follow through. Essentially, they have a little loop here where the poles attach, so you don't need to use straps, and they just hook and unhook, just like a Nordic glove system works. So this is what I would use. This is what I'm using for all my races now. Okay, now last but certainly not least, the pack. Now this is what I use for Tor Des Geants. This is the Salomon S-Lab Peak 20, which is actually a 22-liter pack. This was only available for a couple of seasons, but this pack was amazing. Having said that, it had a bunch of drawbacks. So basically, this pack had a big zip down the back. It was a single compartment in the back. And then in the front was this huge vest system that was just super innovative. Very different than the other running packs. And it also had this shoulder system where it actually, as you can, I don't know if you can see this here, it spread the weight out right over to the edge of your shoulder. So it held weight really well. It had pockets on the shoulders, huge pockets on the front where you could put a ton of food, big pockets for flasks. You could put huge bottles here, extra pockets here. Pockets everywhere, as I said, about 22 liters of capacity. It had drawstrings here, so you could really adjust it. You could adjust it on the top, strings on the side to help cinch it in, extra pockets on the side here for spare flasks. Now, having said that, there were a lot of points of failure on this pack. Basically, I mean, this white cord here is almost like paracord. That was pretty good. But the way that the pack attached, it was basically a pack hanging off of this entire vest system. There were really two different pieces. And the pack itself attached with these little black hooks. And unfortunately, I've had a couple of these break over the years, and so I've stopped using this pack since. Each one of these represents a point of failure. And I think that was probably one of the reasons why they stopped making this pack, was it was too expensive to handle the warranties on it. And probably there wasn't enough of a demand as well. This is quite a niche pack and very, I think, expensive to manufacture. It was quite expensive at the time as well. And actually, I should say, I was always a little worried about this zipper as well. I much prefer a top-loading pack, a roll top, because you can really stuff stuff in there and then clip it down. Whereas with this, I was always worried about overpacking it, because this single point of failure, if this was to break during a race, contents of your pack would be everywhere. Now, if I was to race again, I would probably try to use something like this, the Advanced Skin Cross Season 15. This is a new pack from Salomon that came out last season. I used it for our fast pack of the Hard Rock 100 course and for a couple of adventures in the Alps as well. I love this pack for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's basically the Advanced Skin 12, as you can see here, as far as the overall construction, but with a larger capacity on the back. It's got pockets in the front here for nutrition, room for your flasks, and then outside additional pockets here for things like nutrition as well. I keep a GoPro here and my phone on the other side. On the back, it's actually two compartments. It's got this big exterior compartment, which is a roll top, and then it's got a separate internal compartment that's waterproof. It's got the tape seams here. You can have your bladder in here, or you can keep clothing that you want to keep dry in there. So as I said, 15 liters could be a little bit on the small side for all the required kit for a race like Tor Des Geants, but the reality is that S-Lab Peak 20, which again was closer to 22 liters, was on the big side. And this one has these kangaroo pouches here. You can fit quite a bit of extra stuff. So I would probably try to get away with this pack. And this really does run and fit like a race vest. Okay, so that's it for the gear that I would use for Tor Des Geants. Now I'll be doing similar breakdowns like this for all of my future race and adventure videos, but if there are any other races that you've seen in films of mine that you'd like me to go back and revisit, let me know in the comments below.